Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our next session, which is going to be a panel discussion. And I have the great pleasure today to host a panel around one of the hottest topics in the industry today. Nowadays, you could probably not give any conference without touching upon AI and its relationship to big data. Today, we're going to learn more about that. We're going to pick a number of industries experts' brains, and I have the great pleasure to introduce to you today an excellent panel from, again, globally, all over the world. And I'm going to start with a quick round of introductions. So for those of you who just joined in, my name is Jen. I'm the president of the Enterprise Big Data Framework Alliance, and I will be your host today, moderating some of the questions, but also challenging these gentlemen to answer the hard questions around AI. With me today, I would first like to introduce Kieran Hagen. Kieran, welcome to our panel today. Can you explain a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thanks, Jan. Great to be here. My name is Kieran Hagen. I'm from IBM, and I look after data, AI, and automation software in the IBM business. So this is a very interesting topic close to my heart. I'm very pleased to be here and with this audience and esteemed panel.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I can only assume how much data IBM is collecting, managing, and dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Also very happy to have IBM here as a pioneer with Watson and all the technology that you guys have already created. So yeah, really looking forward to discussing that with you in more detail. Then my next guest is Faisal. Faisal is the Vice President of Strategy and Insight at Sila. Can you explain a little bit about yourself, Faisal?
Hi, this is Faisal. Thanks for the introduction, Jen. Yes, I'm VP Strategy and Insights at Sila. Sila is actually a Arabic native AI technology that's here to disrupt and redefine the market research industry by using big data and AI. So looking forward to the discussion today.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned earlier it's one of the first Arabic companies that is doing this, right?
Absolutely. So one of the need gaps, we realized that there's no technology, no AI basically that understands Arabic. And everything uses basically all interpretation is using translation tools, which never gets it right. Arabic, people who know Arabic, it's an extremely complex language with 26 plus dialects. So yeah, so the technology allows us to access and understand data and consumers in the different dialects.
Wow, I'm very impressed. I'm quite sure we're going to learn more about that in the next hour. So welcome to the panel. And then my last guest is Vincent Kok. He's the head of data at HiPages. Vincent, welcome to our panel as well. Would you like to do a quick introduction?
Sure. Thanks again for the invitation to join the esteemed guest today to go through such an interesting topic. I'm Vincent Koch. I've been in the data scene for the last 20 years or so. At HiPages, I look after the data department, which spans both data analytics, data engineering, and data science. HiPages is a listed company in Australia, one of Australia's largest online trading marketplaces. So we connect consumers with tradespeople, and being a marketplace, we're actually very rich on sort of data day to day. More recently, we, I think, completed our 11 millionth job on the platform. So a lot of data going through the platform each day. A lot of interesting sort of use cases there for us. Also, outside of my day job, I do lecturing and teaching in the data science space, but more at the executive level. So how do we bring people that are interested in technology and in data into a more sort of rapid learning environment so they can learn AI and learn data science and apply those skills in their day jobs as well.
Yeah, I'm super happy to have you on the panel because one of the main topics that came by in all of the sessions today is the profound impact that AI, big data has on our lives every single day, but also the tremendous skills gap on that still exists on people who are using these solutions who have absolutely no clue how it works and all of the bits and pieces behind that. So we've been talking a lot around data democratization, data literacy, getting people up to speed. So I'm later in the panel today, I'm also very much looking forward to picking your brain on that. But before we get started with that, let me start with the main topic for today, which is artificial intelligence and basically the impact that it has on our lives. Everyone by now has heard about solutions like ChatGPT, DALL-E, image generation, voice that is automatically created, Deep fakes is also something that we're typically concerned about these days. Is how is data and AI going to have an impact on the way that we all live? So I'd like to start with my first question, and maybe it's a good question to get started with for Kieran. What is your view with all of these new technologies? What are the practical use cases that we are going to see in organizations with these new technologies?
Yeah, thank you, Jan. And look, we're seeing an increased awareness of AI, particularly with some of those announcements you talked about. The past 6 months have created a dialogue in media, in boardrooms, and in my own home. I've been working with software for 17 years. No one at the dinner table bothered to ask me about AI until my son wanted to know if ChatGPT could help him pass his exam. And my partner wanted to know how she could prevent, people passing university exams on the fly. So
now you all of a sudden have a cool job.
All of a sudden. It's like, I've been doing it for years, but now it's popular. So yay us. But the good news is that the potential of AI impacts many areas. We're talking about areas of traditional work that could be process or document-based. We're talking about digital labor, workforce realignment. A lot of AI technologies were still focused on what we call customer care. So creating something simple like a chatbot, maybe moving that to a virtual assistant. From one perspective, I see AI as the next generation of productivity tool. So anything that is mundane, robotic, repetitive, that can potentially be streamlined by AI and improve decision-making. But the end use cases are actually exponential. These could be applied to things like sustainability, cybersecurity, next generation care. So I think there is a huge potential here. And the onus on a lot of individuals is to understand and move with this capability with some awareness and guardrails to make it a reality.
Absolutely, and I fully agree with that, because that's going to be where the speed is going to be. So let's shift to Faisal. You already kind of introduced the Arabic use of technology and AI. Could you explain a little bit what's your perspective? Where are we going to see AI most quickly adopted, and specifically in the area that you work in?
Yeah, I think Karen touched upon the possibilities and the multiple use cases. I'll just latch on to one of the use cases which I live day in and day out. So market research, consumer intelligence is centuries old business, right? From Nielsen's of the world, Kantar's, Ipsos's of the world, that go out with a pen and paper questionnaire, still meet people and talk about what they feel about, who's going to win the elections, what they feel about an advertisement, what new products do they want to see, what do they think about a certain campaign. And we realized that there's no need to do that. You don't need to go out and find people and ask for those answers, with technology, access to technology today, that's not needed. And that's where, AI and big data comes. And how does that come at play? When I talk about consumer data, one, let's say social media. So you've got, people posting about their ideas, about what they think about certain things, people commenting on it. The videos you're seeing, the engagement, the things you're liking, going on Amazons of the world, leaving your reviews, your ratings on Make My Trip, giving a review to a hotel, or just your behavior data on what you're doing and what you're searching on Google.
Yeah.
With access to all that information, I'm talking about millions of people, billions of data points. There is absolutely no question that cannot be answered about the consumers, for whether that's for a new product development an organization wants to launch, whether that's for a new marketing campaign or a new pricing strategy, or any kind of CX related customer experience, aligning a customer journey, or whether people are happy with my product, not happy. It pretty much gives you access very quick, quite cheap, half the cost of what any other traditional approach would do. So yeah, that's something I live day in and out, and it's here to disrupt the entire industry, and that's one use case I can really talk about with a lot of confidence.
Great, thanks for sharing that. Let's also move to Vincent to get your perspective. I can only assume that with the amount of data that you just mentioned and introduced, that there must already be some practical cases that you're experimenting with, or that you are maybe already in full operation. Where do you see common use cases, both within your company as well as at other locations?
I think I'll talk more generally in terms of marketplaces and sort of digital organizations. I think traditionally, artificial intelligence and data science has lent a really strong use cases have been always developed from sort of marketing and customer centric sort of point of view. So traditionally, those retail organizations and sort of e-commerce businesses have always had the best use cases, I suppose, traditionally around that. So, and we're sort of seeing a similar thing. The trend with large language models and sort of more advanced AI is that the most people are pivoting towards this like 1% of the use case, which is all about sort of content generation and sort of creating this sort of text generation, image generation sort of things. But we know that from an AI perspective, there's so much more that can possibly occur. But I think most people are sort of tend to be used to those sort of use cases traditionally.
So you're picking on something which I find is very interesting, because you're saying basically the text generation, image generation is 1% of the use cases. In your experience and from your point of view, what is that 99% that is still hidden? Where can organizations get more value besides the content generation?
So if you look at any organization, right, sometimes they tend to focus a lot on the customer, or in our case, we've got two sides of a marketplace. So we've got the customer and the supply and the demand, right? But in some cases, I think a lot of the opportunities actually within the organization itself. They're actually more tangible, more realistic to actually apply, given that you're already working in that space, you're already inside the business, and you start treating the business as a customer. You can look at each department and its various use cases. For example, your HR department might need analytics around which employees are going to leave, how should we remunerate people. There could be a huge revenue potential for that. Maybe with finance, can we spot fraud? Can we help organize your accounts? Can we reduce a lot of that repetitive work? And you could go through this process through many organizations and different departments. And I think people tend to get fixated on the sort of what they think is the revenue generating part. But when you actually look at the risks in your business, where the bottlenecks are, and actually start to think like the C-levels do, and go, where am I spending the most time? Where is it there are a lot of human complexities involved? And how can I insert AI to sort of make that life a lot more simpler? Because if you go for something that you've already been doing for the last 10 years, I'm making this up, but trying a lot of effort, versus you sort of go into an area of your business that hasn't had that labor of love with data. And if you inject a lot of advanced analytics into that team, or some advanced process, or even some sort of good prescriptive or descriptive analytics, you can definitely excel and bring value to the business quite quickly in some of these areas.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that the shift that you mentioned towards internal parts of the organization is still highly underlighted, and that there is still a world to win there. Just to share a little bit from my experience, ever since basically the hype of AI started, if you want to kind of call the introduction of ChatGPT the start of the hype, one of the main questions I get asked by customers is, this new technology is going to transform business. It's disruptive. It's going to become a race in terms of who's first to market. How can you use it? And a lot of the people I speak to are kind of worried around their competitors using it in a more smart way, or faster, or things like that. If you were to give advice to organizations on how to get started with this disruptive technology, on what is the first place that you should be looking at, or how you should get this new technology started, what would be the case? And the reason I'm asking this is because when we started the conference this morning, I did a quick poll, and I asked which of these organizations, of the people in the audience, were already starting with AI, or which ones heard about it or just use it for kind of a personal part. Majority answered that they've tried it, but they are not using it professionally yet. So if you were to give advice to, let's say, a leadership team or executives on how should they get started, what would be the number one piece of advice? Let's start maybe with Kieran.
Yeah, sure. So we do have a renewed interest in AI, and a lot of people are curious both about the potential, but where they could realistically start. Now, from my perspective, this is a conversation about business maturity. So I sometimes consider this an AI health check, which is, well, how good is your information infrastructure? How good are you as a data-driven organization to drive outcomes? If you're still working in spreadsheets and human processes, AI is a bit more advanced than where you could apply it today. What I'm very interested, though, is firstly, focus on your business, right? The real potential of AI is a productivity tool to differentiate what you do as a product or a service, or delivering something to a citizen. So you should really think customer first, right? And think, what is it that I could do with these technologies that I couldn't do before? If that brings me value to the end client, then I can look at technology that help assist in that, and AI might be an enabler to do that. That helps me differentiate and remain competitive in market. The counterpoint as well, as Vincent raised, is what processes am I doing internally that are barriers to delivery and innovation? Is some of that repetitive, non-optimal, slow time to response? They're also areas of optimization. So if you think of AI as both an innovation enabler in terms of competitive differentiation, but also a productivity tool in-house, that usually sets you a sweet spot for focus. And that's an area that you could put into an agile sprint or an engagement to start looking at outcomes and ROI.
Very interesting. Vincent, you just mentioned the internal focus. Do you agree with Kieran here?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's quite important, but on the flip side, like I think some organizations are also going a bit on the extreme side of this and going, let's replace staff with robots, I suppose is one argument here. But even if you look at, say, self-service analytics, when sort of big data started to come about, we actually had the same argument then, because they were like, machines are going to replace humans. And what actually ended up doing is it ended up augmenting the human decision-making process, right? And assisting humans in that process. So I almost feel like this next revolution or this cycle that we're going through with AI, AI summer, as we like to call it, because I think in the past it was an AI winter, the evolution sort of stopped. What we're hoping to see, or I'm hoping to see, is actually organizations that use it effectively actually augment the human in the process. They go, human is doing a process of decision making. It's still ultimately their decision. The creativity lies with them. But how do we give them the tools to make smarter decisions, to give them all the information that they need? And I think AI is just another tool in the arsenal to help them enable to do that.
Absolutely. I think that's very good insight. And from what I've seen with organizations, AI is a way to become more competitive, and typically means organizations are going to grow as a result of it. And from what I've seen, it's not, or I've not seen any company that says we're going to use AI in order to kind of reduce headcount or things like that. It's just a shift. Moving to Faisal, this concern around the loss of jobs through AI, it's one of those points that always comes back. Is that something you recognize as well?
Yeah, not really. I mean, it's just about skill sets. It's about transitioning skill sets. While we may think that it's just enabling, making things faster, helping us, elevating human capabilities, it's really about speed, accuracy, where it's helping us. So it's not about replacement. It's all, I know there's a lot of discussion, debate about replacement, but it's also not as complex as you would like to think. AI by nature is complex.
Sure.
Technology by nature is complex. But so organizations just need to keep it simple and put a genuine effort in simplifying and differentiating the must-haves and the good-to-haves. And in that context, just see about the skill sets, about what needs to be made faster. Where can we kind of enable people? So it's not really about, in my mind, it's really about skill sets, and it's really about the right skill sets. Be very overwhelming. AI can it's by nature, it's complex.
I think you're touching upon a very interesting point when you mentioned that we're moving towards a transitioning skill set. If I can ask you a follow-up question, What is the shift that we are going to see when it comes towards these skill sets?
I'll give you a simple example. I mean, in our so to say industry or marketing, the marketing world, you've got AI that's allowing automation of, let's say, data collection, data cleaning, analysis, and let's say visualization. But now with all the chatter and talk around, buzz around ChatGPT, even inferencing those data, coming out with the actual insights, recommendations, what you should do about that, is very much possible through technologies like ChatGPT, and they're very capable of actually generating the final report that goes to the client. So it's really not about, now when I talk about transitioning as a researcher, it's not really about it's not that I'm not relevant. It's about understanding how I can make best use of ChatGPT to still give the output to the end client by making it much faster.
Yeah.
So it's really about a very quick transition, and about acknowledging that what are the possibilities and making best use of it.
Very, very interesting. Vincent, you are actually teaching on a weekly, monthly basis. So you are involved with basically educating the next generation of leaders and people who attend your classes towards that changing skill set. What are the main things that you think should change in terms of these skill sets? Is it really more technical? Is it more around cultural changes? What is the main thing that you see?
Yeah, I think there's actually two elements. So there's an element around technology, as you say, actually understanding the tools at your disposal. I think as an industry, everyone's sort of gravitating towards ChatGPT. It's currently the Ferrari. Everyone's sort of seeing that as the only make and model, but actually large language models and transformers have been around for some time. Even the models underlying OpenAI stuff has been actually around for some time as well. So what we're going to see is a proliferation of these models. Google themselves and OpenAI themselves have actually mentioned that these models are getting too big, and to solve specific problems, what people are going to do is create specific models. So what we're going to find is things that are highly regulated or where the data is quite hard to get a hold of. People are going to create and train their own models. So we're going to see things like, in Faisal's case, market specific, how do you handle Arabic? Or we're going to get things like specific to law or specific to, say, health, where the health data is not available. There's going to be specific models built for those problems. So we're going to end up with many versions of different models for specific problems, just as we did in sort of traditional artificial intelligence space. And I think that's going to actually make the space a little bit more interesting. So we're sort of going through this sort of initial hype cycle, and then we'll start to get very, nuanced sort of products and services out there. And that sort of hasn't settled. And we'll soon to see like big cloud providers like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and even IBM creating their own, suite of services and variations. And what's going to happen is, as people in this space, how do I keep on top of the different tools available? How do I use them effectively? Because they're going to have their own sort of nuances. Same as, again, going back to big data example, with the advent of cloud technology, although a lot of the solutions are quite similar, but actually within each one of these major cloud providers, you've got a different set of nuanced tools specific to them with pros and cons. So how do you leverage that? And then on the flip side is the human element, right? An organizational side, and it goes back to just good business thinking, good product thinking. Actually, what problem am I solving? How do I iterate on that? And how do I build that? It's just bringing that together with real life examples of how you scale this stuff and what looks good. So at the moment, I think a lot of people are trying different things, but when you actually try to put things like large language models into practice at scale, it's actually more challenging than people think, because you can create these little MVPs, but if you want to create a rich experience that your customers are going to love, or it's actually going to solve meaningful problems and be reliable and scalable, it's actually a bit more complex than people think.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying in terms of this is just the initial hype, and then after that, we're going to go into those more tailored solutions. You also mentioned the big cloud providers. We have one of the big cloud providers amongst us, IBM, obviously. So it's kind of logical that I switch the next question to you, Kieran. And that is this becoming a race to who has the best model? We obviously all know Watson as one of the early pioneers in this field. would you say IBM is going to try to kind of make a separate model or build on what you already have? How do you approach the question of AI competitiveness within IBM? From what you can share, obviously.
Yeah, sure. I mean, AI is a very dynamic field, and we actually see AI at an inflection point. We think it is now a key priority for people in government and business. IBM's approach is actually varied. We do have a 16 petabyte knowledge store called Bluemine that is curated content that builds what we call foundation models. For example, we're working with NASA, and we take satellite images into a geospatial foundation model. However, IBM believes in openness and community development for AI. So that foundation model is available to communities to build any new use case. So you could create something like carbon capture or emergency support for locations. The foundation model actually enables you to build whole new AI use cases. A large language model is one example. So we believe an AI open community is actually the way that AI development is going to accelerate. We would say that the large cloud providers, companies like IBM, can help handle some of the compute and acceleration of those intensive model developments. But open areas of community, and I'm thinking things like Hugging Face as an example, with open communities and businesses building their own, this innovation should be open. And as we talked about skills, we're seeing a younger generation of skills coming on board. Children in schools now learning Python code, ChatGPT making natural language processing accessible. I think we're at a very impressive acceleration point. And private vendors help in some of the heavy lifting, but innovation is as an open community, and the tailoring is to make it fit for your data and your business, because that's your differentiation and what you offer your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. You're touching upon a point that I think is one of the main concerns also with AI, and that is not everyone is familiar with what the algorithms are doing. And you mentioned very justly, in my opinion, that there's a huge drive to move towards open source or open AI, and that people know the algorithms beyond that. This push towards a more open source or open community, is that something that you are also in favor of? Let me start with Faisal on that. And how do you balance that with commercial decisions?
Look, you're right. So look, everything is with AI, things are getting democratized. They're getting cheaper. They're getting faster. And with that also, you kind of have concerns around accessibility and what's really going behind this. But I think with the whole democratization, decentralization, it's going to get more open. Mm-hmm. There's dependence on people that's going to reduce. It's going to be data is going to be accessible in an organization across every table, and you don't need to pick up the phone and speak to X person to get that information. So so the dependence on, to put it really shortly, dependence on openness on open AI is just going to increase, and with that also comes a lot of careful usage of AI.
Absolutely, that's to say the least.
Because with democratization, it comes with a lot of risks. Elon Musk has been talking about it. Yeah. But yeah, so there needs to be a control aspect at some point of time, because if it's on every table, and where does it stop? Because if you're getting like all the algorithms are open, you have access to it, you have access to data, then a parallel universe, you need to kind of have something that also controls it, and where you can find how it's used.
Vincent, do you share that opinion as well, that it needs to be more open, and at the same time, what are the risks that we're going to see there?
Yeah, 100%. So I think that, as I mentioned, if we take the approach that Kieran mentioned with foundational models, and then people take their own data in their own private spaces and create their own proprietary models to solve specific problems, as the example that I sort of went through, what we're going to find is that balance of how do you support sharing but still have commercial viability attached to it. So for us as an organization, as High Pages in the engineering space, we're sort of very focused in open technology as much as we can. But I think there's a balance act here, because you sort of need to still adopt good commercial products. So for us, and my own personal thinking here is, open source is good, but sometimes open source comes with its own challenges as well. So I think open technology and open standards is probably the way forward. We started to see that with sort of machine learning and artificial intelligence, with sort of the Python sort of leading the way, and certain things around PyTorch and a few other sort of libraries there sort of taking the reins around that. With other sort of technologies as they start to grow, it's like, what does that interface look like between these different services, applications, cloud providers, and vice versa? So that hasn't yet sort of come to any sort of fruition. And I think it'd be the big providers, or the big software vendors, the big hardware players, that are going to really start to shape the space for all of us as end users.
Absolutely. So with the open movement, as all of you agree with, I think we're all on the same page that open is something that we should strive for. But I was at a conference the other day, and they said open source is open risk. And it also means that people can start using it towards ways that probably are not well intended. And that kind of brings me towards the next major topic that we're obviously need to address within any discussion around AI. And that is the problem, if I can call it that, around starting to differentiate real from fake, artificially generated from not. And I'd like to start with a quick example. I'm quite sure I started my opening keynote this morning with this as well. As we've all seen that photograph of the Pope in the white Balenciaga jacket that was artificially generated. And I think the reason that I bring that up as kind of a pivotal moment is that a lot of people actually thought that was real. And it took some time in terms of a lot of social media coverage and a lot of articles that were written by professional newspapers that actually said, well, this is something that we need to address, because if a significant proportion of the population thinks that this is real, then we might be in trouble afterwards. And after that moment, we've seen other photographs which were generated by these kind of tools that showed world leaders in weird situations, etc. So the main issue I think that we need to address is, now we're putting these tools into the hands of everyone. If you would have wanted to, you could have done this always if you were very, very skilled at Photoshop or other kind of technology. But now it becomes as easy to do with the click of a button without any knowledge or any direct review of the consequences. Everyone can put everything out there. So my main question is, we're first going to talk about how are we going to address this? And then after that, I also would like to talk a little bit more with you around how are we going to address this from an organizational perspective? Because that's also going to be, I think, a big challenge. Let me start in this case by going back to Vincent. How are we going to prevent as a society the misuse and misinformation that you start to see happening already?
Yeah, I think the misuse and misinformation's sort of already started, as we all know. The cat's sort of out of the bag. So at some stage we will see sort of regulation or something of the sort. There's already discussions around sort of what does an AI ethics framework look like? What does sort of AI and regulated markets look like? So if you think traditionally, any sort of data IT space, what's high risk? Well, self-driving cars, anything that to do with medicine or putting medication into people. So you start to think of these use cases, right? So that might be quite controversial. People might want, some controls in place. Like if you take a human, it is a very good example. Let's say a doctor makes an error 5% of the time. Robot does 2%, but humans are going to be hung up because a robot's making a mistake 2% of the time. Like, what's comfortable? And if you take this sort of thinking space in more traditional artificial intelligence and data science, there's a lot of rigor involved. There's a lot of measurement. There's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of evaluation right before you start these projects. But I feel like with the more sort of commonplace technologies that we're seeing now, such as generative AI and large language models, they don't exist. They're effectively guessing the response. It's effectively how the technology works. So organizations are blindly taking this technology on board, but it's very hard to know how to use it effectively. So I've kind of gone off in a little bit of a tangent. To bring it back, I think the key here is actually how does organizations put the human back into it? So at the end of the day, the human's the one who knows that the responses are true or false. They're the one who knows that this model's quite not right, even though the machine believes it to be absolutely true. So regardless of what goes on, there's always going to be this aspect of, us retraining the model or teaching it, going, actually, this is right, this is wrong. And there's a lot of services now out there to help sort of organizations navigate this space as well.
Absolutely. Good. I think you're providing some real interesting insights here. Let's switch towards Faisal for a second. What's your view? How are we going to make sure that the machines behave ethically?
It's not got a straightforward answer, and I think, like Vincent said, it's already out there, and we're already struggling. I think what's really happening is the technology per se is moving at a faster pace than the regulation, and the regulation itself needs to catch up. There needs to be, it's usually a cause and effect, but there needs to be, you need to foresee the problems, the issues that are going to, and it's not difficult. We already can see them, and we know how bad it can get as we progress with time. It's about how we regulate it. We've seen Cambridge Analytica data privacy issues in the past. Again, the issues when they escalated to a stage where they really had to really kind of get on forefront and address that issue. Till then, it was just happening, and that's going to happen again. We just need to. It's just the regulations, policies that need to come in place much faster than the technology itself, or work in tandem with the technology. They have to work together. Right now, technology is far ahead of the regulation.
Yeah, I'm glad that governments around the world are kind of known for their speed for regulation. So I think we're going to see some work there. Kieran, what's your opinion? How should and could we regulate this, and how can we address this growing concern?
Yes, even the CEO of OpenAI expressed the need for guardrails. Right. So in IBM, we actually have an AI ethics council. And I'll talk about the 3 principles we have in IBM because it actually talks to what Vincent and Faisal talked about. The first is the purpose of AI is to augment human intelligence. Notice that's augmentation. So keeping the human in the loop, as Vincent said, is very important because the decision should ultimately be accountable to an individual. Second is that data and insights belong to their creator. In other words, if it's your information, you should be the custodian. That's one of the guardrails as well. And the third is that technology must be transparent and explainable. We've talked about that concept of, let's call it AI hallucination, right? That something could be given in a very humanistic, naturalistic, and a confident form that is, shall we say, fake news. So if you're making a business critical decision or in a regulated or governed industry, it does not absolve you of responsibility. So you can check for bias, fact and accuracy. That should be introduced. I see this under the umbrella of responsible of AI. And that in turn, is what regulation tries to catch up with. But the principle is to act responsibly.
Yeah, I think you're moving towards a very good point. This morning in the opening session, we also talked quite a bit around best practices on dealing with massive quantities of data, and especially in artificial intelligence. And one of the points that was raised is the question, should every organization set up an AI ethics committee or an AI ethics policy? Let's return back to Kieran. I think I kind of know your answer, but would you think that's a good idea?
We're actually seeing people in government and some businesses called the AI officer. And this is now becoming part of their corporate policy. I think this is, we've been through chief data officers, chief data risk officers. I could see this as the next step in evolution. But if you're going to use AI, I think you need a guardrail and a policy.
Good. I think that's a very good comment. Let's check with the other gentlemen to see if they already have AI ethics officers or AI officers. Vincent, is that a role that exists at High Pages? And if not, should it be there?
Australia is quite new to the term Chief Data Officer, but you've to give you a sense of how things are moving, the Australian government, any federal government organisation in Australia has to have a data ethics person actually appointed. So just to give you a flavour that, even though AI might not be in the title, it'll be a key part of that role. So even for some organizations, just what is data ethics, starting there, I think is a good point. And I think the interesting thing about ethics goes beyond the law. It actually goes to how you value and what's the interpretation and what's the perception around the work that you're doing. So I think just understanding that space and navigating that space is quite interesting. So from our perspective, for example, when we work around privacy-related risks, I work quite closely with my security counterparts, my legal counterparts, and we need to quantify risk, and there's a lot of elements to that. So it's not just a data story, and I think it's important to bring others into that sort of journey. I think when Kieran was talking about setting up a council or committee, that's the sort of different perspectives that you want to bring in, so you can sort of educate the organization as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask the same question to Faisal as well. Does your organization already have somebody in charge of ethics and the way that algorithms are being used?
So the Dubai, the Arab world is quite regulated that way. It's quite controlled, and they're quite stringent about it for multiple factors, culturally, socially, politically, etc. But I think one of the biggest things is the lack of knowledge, the lack of education when it comes to that fine line. What is, if it's privacy, where do you kind of cross the line, and what is private, what is not private, what is ethical, what's not ethical? And I can give you one example, and I can I'm the scapegoat here, where if I'm doing let's say a consumer piece of understanding consumers, and I want to show some examples to support the numbers, of actual conversations. Can I do that or not do that? What is public? What is private? I didn't know that,
Yeah.
So I had to reach out to be able to understand where do I draw that line. So I think the education aspect needs to really come out, and to understand where do you draw that line about what's ethical, what's not ethical, what's private, what's not private, what you can show, what you cannot show. And of course, if there's a committee, call it a committee, call it an individual, call it an officer, if there's someone who has that knowledge to be able to guide, and that's also it's not a one-time education. Like I was talking about how fast and technology is moving, it's really about that constant evolution and understanding of where do you kind of what you can do and not do, and that needs to be a constant process. The education needs to be a continual process in any organization.
Very, very interesting. Speaking about ethics, I thought it would be fun to kind of give you also a bit of an ethical dilemma to kind of think about. And it's been a conversation that I had in a number of sessions before, and the situation is as follows. Someone, by using an AI tool, creates some kind of let's say a deep fake video around the president doing something illegal, or just as a use case. That video goes viral. It has a lot of consequences. The ethical dilemma is here. If we need to fine someone, so send out a penalty or something, should that go towards the company for creating an algorithm that is able to be used by the public in order to create that? Should the fine go towards the person that actually created the image with mal intent, or both, or none? So just would like to think what you view about that. Maybe let's start with Vincent. What do you think?
I've actually put the scenario into ChatGPT in the background, but I already know what actually, when you give it this, it
will be very fun if it now says it needs to find OpenAI.
But the interesting thing is, if you give it this sort of ethical dilemmas, it actually tends to veer on the side of itself.
I was surprised.
Part of the dust has already thought 10 steps ahead. But honestly, it's I don't have the answer to this, because it comes back to what's right and wrong in a given scenario, and how do we value that. And I think this sort of tricky stuff to navigate it is going to unfortunately require some guardrails, code of practice, laws, whatever that may be, to actually say, in this scenario, you should do X. And if you think about medicine, right, that's the most sort of complex one I could think of. Law is one thing, but take medicine, for example. It's been heavily proceduralized to avoid the decision-making process. So when doctors do things or when nurses do things, they're doing it because they are following a protocol, and that protocol has been given to them, so that they're not actually thinking in that process. They're just acting, and they're just taking the decisions. And I'm hoping that sort of scenario actually happens here, where ethics aside, whatever the right and wrong is, it's already predetermined in some sense. So it doesn't become this sort of conversation where it's not binary, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. And that's also why I'm specifically posing this question, of course. Kieran, if you were the judge and executioner in this case, what would be your verdict?
I actually have a different perspective from your conclusion there. I'm okay that someone created the technology platform that could build this generative image. I'm okay that someone created the content. It's probably under creative rights, right, to create the content. What I would insist on is, as a consumer of that media or content, I want to know its provenance and accuracy. And if I'm going to prosecute anyone, it's probably the media feed or channel that purported it as real without giving me the fact check and bias background. And I think that is the gate. As consumers, we can take anything on spec, take it or leave it, but accuracy, fairness, and bias, that can be tested and should be checked through those channels.
Good. I think that's a very interesting perspective as well. Last person in line for a guilty or non-guilty verdict, Faisal?
I've got a third opinion.
Okay, good.
So I don't think the creator, like I agree with Kieran, that the creator, because any technology can have, it's always created for, enabling people, augmenting processes, etc. There's always good intent behind it. So, but there'll always be people, as simple as a technology like a calculator can be used for cheating, so you can't really blame the makers, and they will always have the right intent. It is on the individuals to be able to use it with ethics, with responsibility, with the right usage of it that is designed for, and so it comes on to the individual.
Yeah, very good. I think very good perspectives, a little bit different, so kind of shows that this debate is nowhere settled yet. Before I dive into my last topic for today, I would like to invite the audience. I know a lot of people are listening right now, and I've been seeing a lot of comments already in chat, etc. If you have any questions for one of the panelists or all of them, please feel free to use the Q&A function on the right-hand side of the platform, so that you could get and pick the brain of everyone who's participating right here. While we do that, and while we wait for some questions, the final point that I wanted to kind of conclude with this is, or kind of move towards the finalization of this discussion is, we've been talking about the positive sides, the negative sides, and then obviously the role of regulation in this. Now, the difficult part is that we are living in a global world with national regulations. And if we make a rule, let's say I'm based in Malaysia, that rule is going to be completely different from a company that operates, let's say, in Australia or in the Middle East or in the US. Or how are national governments going to deal with this issue, and how could we address this? And if it's not addressable by national regulations, is it something that should be an enterprise responsibility? So let's get your views on that. Let's start with Kieran this time.
So from IBM's perspective, yes, we do believe it's an enterprise responsibility. We actually work with a number of governments in various organizations discussing AI maturity and roadmap. We saw some things like the legislation in the EU with tiers of responsibility and AI coverage. That's an ongoing dialogue. We think that this is a shared conversation, right? And it's an evolving conversation. I don't believe that individual country regulation is actually going to influence the pace of technology at a global level, but it will impact the application for its citizens. However, I think as consumers of information or technology, we should understand the principles by which that technology is designed and used, and that it meets with the larger regulatory requirements and expectations of the citizens. So that to me is ultimately AI ethics and responsible AI. And I think that is a journey that will be continued.
Absolutely. It's definitely not settled yet. Vincent, as a fellow Australian, do you share this point of view?
Yes, I think Kieran touched on a good point around citizens, right, and their expectations. So I think where it gets interesting is going to be every country and their citizens are going to have different, I suppose, value systems and beliefs, and that's probably going to drive market level nuances dependent on what matters to them. Could be various different things, and it's going to be a broad spectrum as well. So some places might be fearing, I don't know, complexities in their political landscape due to media and other things like that. Others might be worried about, people's faces being used in this, or artists being, their works being sort of borrowed and things like that. So there's going to be different issues, and different markets and different industries and cultures and people are going to sort of view different issues differently. And I think that's where we're going to see some sort of common ground rules established in different areas, but then we're going to see nuances in sort of its application and sort of how it's been interpreted in each one of these markets. And it's very sort of similar, I would say, privacy laws, where we see lots of variation. There's a couple of things that are quite similar, but in different areas, there's some variation to it, because it makes sense to those consumers. It makes sense to enterprises and those organizations that work in those places. So it'll be a collaborative effort between companies, private sector, public sector, government, and sort of enterprise organizations to sort of come together and sort of paint the picture of what's that balance that needs to be struck to make this work.
Nice. I think that the balancing part is absolutely the key point that you're touching upon right there. I know I'm getting some nudges that we're almost at the end of the hour, but I still saw that there was one question coming in. Maybe a good question to project on the screen, and I'm going to ask Faisal to comment on it before we move towards a closure. The question is from Oliver Reed, and he's asking, speaking about a data-driven organization, how can we ensure data accuracy and reliability are safeguarded? I assume that's what he means.
Accuracy has been a topic of discussion for a long time now. And one of the interesting things I can talk about in large industry, let's say, where we're using, let's say, consumer data. Every single organization, and we often have this internal conversations, that every single organization here who has access to consumer data or is in the field of research using technology globally claims to have an accuracy of 90% plus.
Yeah.
Who vouches for it? No one. There is absolutely no one who can claim. So if I truly believe, and I was having a conversation that what should be my USP be, I said it should be accuracy. And because I believe that's my USP. But everyone else is doing that. And I know they're not probably at that level of accuracy. And the only way to do it is, again, bodies, third-party bodies that are created, that go through a rigorous process to be basically auditing data, auditing accuracy. And that can be, it's like financial auditing, like Ernst & Young's of the world, the PwC of the world, where they're auditing firms on their accuracy of financial data and financial obligations. Similarly, there needs to be bodies regulating data or vouching for accuracies. Otherwise, at this point of time, the answer is there isn't a very organized way of measuring accuracy or reliability of data. It's just my word versus your word.
Correct. Very good. With that, gentlemen, we are absolutely, I've stretched it as far as I can go. I could probably talk to you all for another hour, but I would like to thank everyone for their participation. Before I say goodbye, I just wanted to kindly remind everyone listening that we also still have a challenge competition for the Be Data Driven book. So I'll quickly launch the next poll. which is question number 2. Which company introduced the term big data in the 1990s? And let me start that. This is for our esteemed panel. There is a competition for a number of hard copy books provided by Kogan Page, the publisher, who is making this event possible. So don't put the question in ChatGPT. That would be cheating. But take a few seconds to answer this in case you would like to win this. Good. I see a lot of people have already answered this. I'm gonna close the poll because we have a number of next speakers waiting. So coming up next is Faisal, who is going to be presenting on big data and consumer insights. So you're not done, Faisal, and I'm going to be introducing Marek as well. Thanks everyone for your insights, and thanks for sharing your perspective. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks everyone.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to be here.